Hey there everyone, hope you're doing well. Ketchup Kami-sama here with some more Ramlethal tech for you guys since she's still the only character I play in Guilty Gear Strive. But what I've got for you here is yet another way to extend your pressure while in the corner and really take advantage of your opponent not knowing what's going on. There's a lot to go over though, so I'll be splitting up this video into two main parts, the first being a basic explanation to get you started if you just want to know how to bully your friends or the people in the tower. And the rest will be a super in-depth look at it all so that you really know how all of the pieces interact with each other. Spoiler alert, the full breakdown is going to be really dense. There's a lot of specific information about nearly everything a character can do, but I really feel this topic deserves such thoroughness. This isn't some advanced, difficult to execute piece of tech, there's just a ton of variance with the interactions that I'm going to be covering that I just feel you should know. I'll try and keep everything as concise as possible, but just wanted to give that bit of fair warning before we started. Timestamps will of course be in the description below in case you want to skip to anything specific, but anyway, so that you don't have to keep waiting too much longer, let's get right into it. So Ramlethal has a few pieces within her toolkit that result in a hard knockdown, but we're just going to be focusing on the situations following a grab, either forward or back throw into the corner and off of 2D, the universal sweep. Both of these are going to be really common for you to be getting, and the rest is super easy to get into place. To start with, I'll explain the version off of throw, although admittedly both are basically the same. After you throw your opponent, you'll just do heavy sword toss immediately. Now, some of you might already be familiar with this and have seen others go for a meaty 2K or run up throw before the sword blows up, something like that. But instead, we're simply just going to jump here. You can jump up or forward, it doesn't really matter for now, and as you jump, you'll be holding back or down back to defend against wake up burst or DP attempts. But once the sword explodes, the world is basically now your oyster. You can go for an overhead with any of your buttons as you fall, or you can instead land and go for a low, and of course go for the throw. Just know that the low is not guaranteed here, and you can be thrown out of it. Also, you really have to have a delay before throwing them yourself if that's what you're really wanting to go for. But that should be all the basic details you need to get started with this version, so let's move on to the sweep now. Getting this setup off of 2D is almost the exact same thing as of off of throw, where you do sword toss after 2D, but admittedly this isn't equally effective against everyone in the game, and here's what you at least should know. On most of the cast, 2D immediately into H sword toss will actually connect, but we don't want this as this is going to ruin the timing for the follow-ups. There's only a small handful of characters that it's fine to immediately cancel into sword toss, and those are going to be Soul, Chip, and Zato. The characters that this really won't work on are going to be Faust, Leo, Ramlethal ironically, Giovanna, Nagoriyuki, and Gold Lewis, as the window to hit them off the ground or OTG is much longer than all the other characters for one reason or another. Everyone else, you'll just need to wait a hair before sending the sword flying and you should be all good to go from there. What's neat about this setup is that on the characters that it at least works on, the low is now guaranteed and cannot be thrown out of, forcing them to guess. Now you might ask, but what if they try and do anything, like run away or invincible reversal or something? And to that, I say it's complicated. At the very least, they can't jump out of the explosion and probably not know immediately what to do about it. DPs and 6Ps will generally lose, so there's that, and running out might not work, so that's neat. But this is all I can really say without getting into an overwhelming amount of detail, but if you're wanting those answers, we're gonna get started on that now. And you better buckle up, because there's a lot. So all of the real variance surrounding this setup comes from when the opponent tries to actively do something on defense, so the first thing I'm going to be breaking down here are the basic notes about defense. And before I get started talking about defense, I just want to point out that none of what I'm about to go over applies to the version off of sweep, since in that case the sword keeps them from doing anything except invincible reversals, which I'll get into later. Okay, so earlier I said that it didn't really matter which way you jump after the sword toss, and that's because if your opponent just blocks, there absolutely isn't. The difference in pushback after your landing attacks is nearly negligible in my opinion, so you don't have to worry about close slash spacing or picking up the sword. But depending on if you jump up or forward matters once your opponent starts doing things. If you're only jumping forward after the sword toss, because the explosion isn't hitting them until around frame 8 after their recovery, your opponent can simply walk forward or try to dash out, crossing under you. The game will make it to where they block the explosion, no issue, but crossing you up is the biggest problem here. In this game, your character doesn't automatically change which side they're facing until after doing an air option, like jump or air dash. So if Ramlethal doesn't do anything, the overhead is no longer guaranteed here, and the only option now is to jump again or land, which can be thrown without backdashing or jumping after landing. As Ramlethal, you can IED back early in the forward jump to safely cross them back up again, but you do have to be quick here. Thankfully, jumping straight up fixes this issue. If they keep holding forward, they'll get blown up, and if they don't reverse their input fast enough, they'll also get blown up. On top of that, if they try walking out, this pulls them out of the corner so that you can cross them up if you're feeling like it. So you might be wondering why not always just jump up instead of forward. Well, for starters, if your opponent tries to dash or walk out, on landing you won't automatically pick up the sword again, unfortunately. There is a bit more than just that, but I want to talk about some other countermeasures before I really get into it. In this game, Roman cancels have a bit of startup before activating, and because of the 8-frame gap, this means you have barely enough time to blue Roman cancel away from the corner under Ramlethal, and only in super weird circumstances will you get tagged by the sword explosion. This maneuver does require close to exact timing on the BRC however, as any delay will get your input countered due to the startup of the RC. So if you're the Ram player, hopefully you'll get lucky and just blow them up. Of course, if you don't have meter to work with, then this won't be an option and now you're just forced to guess. Okay, so if I don't have meter, what's the game plan against this setup? In general, something to do for both setups is to FD the follow-ups after the explosion so that it potentially ends their block strings sooner. Just whatever you do, don't FD the sword explosion itself, as it'll give her the frame advantage needed to make the low guaranteed. Also, knowing that if Ramlethal jumps forward, walking forward can be a good way to reduce Ramlethal's air options to get you pinned down. You can even just tap forward and back to block both situations, probably. Alternatively, if you tap the dash macro and hold a direction afterwards, that might make it a bit easier to try and get some spacing while also blocking the explosion. But now here's the issue. What if Ramlethal doesn't jump? What if she 2Ks? What if she throws? Obviously, if you just try to walk out, you can easily get hit. If you try and do your inputs to block low first and quickly doing the walk forwards afterwards, that could work, but if you're not fast enough or you don't react quickly enough, you might just get clipped. Again, if you're caught sleeping at the wheel after doing the forward back input, Ramlethal can dash back over you and get an overhead if you're doing this every single time. And lastly, Ramlethal can even jump forward and then IED back, so if you don't reverse your input after trying to sprint forward, you'll also explode. So yeah, this is another part of why I think changing up between jump up and forward can be beneficial. Of course, this is all a giant game of rock, paper, scissors, only assuming that the opponent knows what their options are. Alright, so that's one part of it all down, but there's much more to this puzzle that we still have to get to, and the next piece we're going to be moving on to is 6P, because believe it or not, this can actually be a game changer. So apparently 6P can help dodge the sword explosions, but not everyone's 6Ps are created equally. Some characters can have longer windows of overall invulnerability, and some can have shorter or longer windows between when their upper body is invulnerable compared to when above their knees is. Off of throw, I haven't found a way to make everyone's 6P viable, but I have found a few that are worth noting. First is going to be Giovanna. I don't know what the invuln values are on her 6P, but it's definitely something good. This is super hard to do, or at least it is for me consistently, but if you slightly walk forward in 6P, you will completely escape the sword explosion. If Ramlethal is jumping forward, you'll even recover before she can punish you in any way that I've found so far. And on top of this, if Ramlethal jumps up instead of forward, you'll actually put her in block stun or hit them, dragging her back down to the ground. If you guys are able to do this consistently, more power to you, as I don't currently have a way of dealing with this besides going for a 2K instead of jump. But if you are going to go for this, you better just pray it works. The other two characters that have troublesome 6Ps for Ramlethal are going to be Potemkin and Gold Lewis. Because they have some of the highest hitting 6Ps and longest durations on their upper body invuln, on wake up both of them can 6P immediately and put Ram into block stun while also avoiding the explosion. But here's the weird thing. They only avoid the explosion if Ramlethal blocks. I don't know what exactly this is about, but if they whiff, they do get caught by the explosion here. So maybe connecting 6P provides an extra frame of invuln or something like that. I'm honestly not too sure, but just know that's at least what happens here. By the way, this also has nothing to do with Ramlethal blocking the 6P while in the air, as on the ground this will have the same result. So now, against these two, you just need to find a way to make them whiff. You can 2K or backdash to call it out on the ground, but if you jump, you can even 2-1-4K to hit them with the explosion and come crashing down on them. But that's everything I've found so far about 6P. It's time to make things even more complicated by talking about reversals though. So like usual, I'm going to be talking about how the reversals in this game work off of the throw version first. I want to be honest and admit that the biggest flaw in my testing here is that all of the following is under the assumption that they do the reversals as soon as they can. If they're able to get the startup closer to when the sword actually explodes, it'll probably be even more effective against this, but that obviously requires more specific timing to do. Okay, so now under this assumption, in some way, shape, or form, both jumping forward and directly up after sword toss will counter all reversals, including supers, for the following characters: Soul, Chip, Axel, Mei, Faust, Anji, Giovanna, Ramlethal, Ino, and Milia. What's happening in most of these cases here is that the sword is exploding after their invulnerability ends, which is why I was saying earlier that if they can do it a few frames after waking up, it might just not work. Otherwise, they're going to be punishable after blocking or something like that. But here's what will happen with everyone I just mentioned. As for those not included in that list, because of the extended duration of Kai's reversals, he doesn't get hit and isn't punishable on landing, but thankfully this doesn't apply to his reversal super. For Leo, even though his DP gets caught in the explosion, you'll be put in air block stun and be forced to land. This applies to both Slash and Heavy Slash versions, but once again, it doesn't apply to his reversal super. If you decide to jump up instead of forward, Potemkin can now get Heavenly Potbuster on you, which sucks. Lastly, Nagoriyuki and Gold Lewis's supers are the only ones that don't get countered and are not punishable on block without instant blocking. Just as a little fun fact though, Faust's item toss super does get hit obviously, but there's actually enough time for a single item to make it out. If the Faust player is trying to do this for some ungodly reason, you better just keep an eye on what item he happens to throw. Okay, moving on to the Sweet version, this one is generally going to be less effective against reversals. For reference, I'm not going to be covering these characters since, like I mentioned earlier, the setup doesn't really work well on them. Some still get countered thankfully. Mei, Milia, Anji, and Ino still won't be hitting you with their reversals and are punishable in some way. Similar to jumping up after throw, this setup also loses to Heavenly Potbuster. The only way to avoid this is by air dashing forward, which I don't believe you can do on a reaction, so it'll just have to be a hard read. A lot of the other reversals aren't punishable unless you just defend, and if you want to try practicing the timing after all of their animations, more power to you, but I know that's a bit much for me personally. Alright, that wraps up everything for reversals. I am aware that I've already gone over a lot, but we're not quite done just yet, as there are a small number of additional counters I want to point out. Alright, so first up is Milia and Mirage, or her Command Dash. This simply just lets her escape as it has upper body invulnerability and allows her to pass through her opponent. This can be called out by 2K instead of jumping, but if you are set on jumping, you can jump backwards, IAD, and do jump kick low to the ground, or do jump H, which will somehow hit here? I don't know, but we take those. Zato can do Drunkard Shade, as the sword explosion is considered a projectile and can be reflected. Because of the height of the reflect, if you don't do anything, it'll put you in block stun, effectively ending your turn. On top of this, the sword will now appear behind Zato, meaning you can't get it back again until it floats to you or you break the wall. You can try knocking him down or throwing him around all you like, but Mom said it's his turn to play with the sword. As Ram, to counter this you can IED shortly after you jump to avoid the explosion and get a jump slash to punish, but this is pretty tight on the timing, and depending on how high you hit, jump slash is going to be punishable on block. If you're not feeling like you've got the timing down, you can do jump heavy instead to put them in block stun and continue your pressure, just without the sword of course. To hard call this out, you can jump straight up instead of forward and do a rising jump kick to catch the startup, and if done correctly, this will net you a combo that gets the sword back and breaks the wall. Well, okay, actually I guess you can really do anything to counter it, this is just something that's fun to do. If Ramlethal jumps forward, Potemkin can forward Mega Fist and pass through you. This is punishable, but you'll just have to be quick on the back IAD to do so. Backwards Mega Fist will get Pot out of the range of the explosion, and if you're not paying attention and it connects, at least you're blocking, but now he has the advantage. To get around this, you just need to be aware that this is an option and be on the lookout for it. On a reaction, you can do jump slash and drag them through a counter hit combo. You can also even throw them back to the ground if you want. Get used to your normal overhead timing so that you don't have to think about it too much if they don't mega fist in either direction, and can easily continue the pressure without missing your inputs. This is definitely something worth setting up the training dummy to practice with, and is super easy to rinse and repeat until you're not needing to guess what he's going to be doing anymore. Phew, okay, that's everything I've got for now. I'm serious. This is the third time I've rewritten this script, so it better be, otherwise I'm just gonna have to keep you on the dark about something because I'm not doing this again. I know that this video was super dense and information heavy, but it really felt necessary to ensure I wasn't pretending this was some unstoppable, completely broken mix-up. Obviously, I'm not claiming to have every single answer out there and could very well have missed something obvious, so if you find something else that works against all of this, I would love to hear it in the comments below. And I'm even open to making a follow-up guide entailing how to deal with this pressure if it's needed in the future. I can imagine that some of you might be asking if all of this is even worth doing since there's so much room for variance and guessing that could go wrong, so much to take into consideration and remember. And to that, I would argue that there is, since in my opinion the reward for guessing correctly can be pretty high. But you guys tell me what you think about all of this. Do you think it's worth it? Potentially broken? Have any ideas to improve it? What's your experience with using this on people in the tower? Feel free to let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you liked and shared so that the word can be spread, and of course be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Also, I post some small tidbits of tech on my Twitter in case I feel it doesn't warrant an entire video, so definitely give your boy a follow on there too. But anyway, that's all for now, so thank you so much for sticking around until the very end, and I hope to see you sometime again soon. But until then, this is Ketchup Kami-sama, signing out. Until next time.